Shelby Mattingly, and for my midterm project, I chose to research the culture and language of Greece. For one of the creative things that I did, I made an olive tree. These are supposed to be olives. And I wanted to do a tree because a lot of what we see in modern Greece came from its ancient Greece roots. So down here we have art and architecture, government, philosophy, language and education, and mythology / historical figures, and the Olympics. So those are the ancient roots, and they symbolize the tree growing and becoming what is now modern day Greece, and the influence that it has impacted on the country now, as well as our culture and cultures around the world. So I'll talk a little bit about the art and architecture, just a few main points because we can't talk forever. So buildings back then were built on tops of hills because they wanted to symbolize them being closer to the gods. Everything was centered around the gods and goddesses and their religion. These three types of columns, we see them every day in our culture and the architecture that we have today. These are the Doric columns, the Ionic columns, and the Corinthian columns. The most well-known building throughout ancient Greek architecture is the Parthenon. It still remains the most famous, and it is built out of the Doric columns. As far as sculpting goes, the Greeks were fascinated with the human body and often depicted nude males performing athletic sports. Women were also often depicted nude, but they had a more serene and peaceful position. Let's see, what else? The Greeks were the first to invent drama and build the first theaters, and epic poems were developed during this time. As far as government goes, Athens was the Greek city-state to find direct democracy, and this was around 508 BC. They did this because they were sick of tyrants seizing control over them, so they wanted a solid form of government. Their form of democracy was direct, so people themselves casted their votes, and that's what the government was. Our form of democracy is representative, of course, so we vote for the representative to represent us in the government and make decisions for us. So that idea happened through ancient Greece government. Philosophy, I did another little crafty thing. I made 3 heads out of clay, and they're each supposed to represent a different philosopher from ancient Greece. We'll start with Socrates. He is most well known for his Socratic method, and basically his idea was he would ask his student a question and wouldn't let the student know whether they were right or wrong. He would just continue asking them questions, and this is often found in our law schools today. It's a very intimidating way of teaching, but it works. Next we have Plato, and he was Socrates' prized pupil. He had a very idealistic and rationalistic way of thinking, and he founded the Academy in 386 BC, and this remained the most well-known higher place of learning for almost a millennium in Greece. And then lastly we have Aristotle, and he is Plato's prized pupil. He foreshadowed the idea of self-actualization, was the teacher to Alexander the Great, and laid the foundation for our modern logic today. So those are a few of the Greek philosophers, and they've had a big impact on our philosophy and other branches of social studies today. As far as education goes, in ancient Greece, it really depended on where you were from. If you were from Athens, you had a more artistic way of being taught. In Sparta, they focused on training boys for the military, beginning at age 7. In Athens, public schools were developed around the Hellenistic period, and both boys and girls were taught. Boys were taught more subjects and were also trained for military service, just not as intense as the Spartans. And girls learned simple reading, writing, and math in order to effectively manage the household. As far as the language goes, we're going to move over to my Greek alphabet board here. And I'm not going to go through each letter because there's not enough time on the video, but Greek is a Latin-derived language just like English, and you can see on the board these in the dark blue, these are the capital letters, and a lot of them are symbols that we're not familiar with, but a lot of them are letters that we also find in our language. A, B, E, Z, H, I, K, M, N, O, P, T, and X are all part of our alphabet as well. You see the pi symbol and other mathematic symbols on the board that are a part of their alphabet. We also see these in a lot of college fraternities and sororities as their names for their certain fraternity or sorority, as well as academic honor societies in college. So they are very prevalent in our culture today, and it's really cool that this language has come into our culture. So that is the alphabet, and actually the word itself, you can see alpha and then bet, which is the first part of beta, and alpha and beta are the first two letters of the Greek alphabet. So when you think of the word alphabet, it comes from the Greeks. So we will move back over to the ancient Greek root of mythology, historical figures. Like I said, Alexander the Great, student of Aristotle, was one of the most well-known heroes in history. He created the Hellenistic period when he kind of ignited the Persians, Greeks, and other cultures combining. So that was a big time in ancient Greece. As far as the Greek gods and goddesses go, this was the religion for the ancient Greeks. They worshiped these gods and looked to them for insight and wisdom in their everyday lives. Just a few of the most well-known gods and goddesses. You have Zeus, father of the gods; Hera, goddess of all living beings and vegetation; Athena, goddess of wisdom and intelligence; Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty; Ares, god of war. So they just played a really big part in the lives of the ancient Greeks. As far as the Olympics goes, I wanted to emphasize this because it got its roots in ancient Greece, but is now a global event, and it's just really cool to see how it literally grew into what it is today. Back then, they only had sprinting, javelin, wrestling, discus, and long jump as their events. Today, we have all kinds of sporting events that athletes can compete in. And back then, just like today, it was 4 years apart, so one Olympics would be held, and then the next would happen 4 years later. And the very first Olympics began around 776 BC, and this was a way for athletes to showcase their ability. Like I said, the ancient Greeks were fascinated with human performance and the human body, so this was a way to showcase that. Now we're going to literally grow and look at modern day Greece. Here's a map of Greece. This is the main part. We have some of the islands down here. Crete is the largest of the Greek islands. Turkey is to the east of Greece, and then surrounding it from the northern borders you have Bulgaria, Fyrom, and Albania. And it's a Mediterranean country, so the Mediterranean Sea surrounds it. Let's see, as far as religion goes, 98% of the Greek people are Greek Orthodox Christians, which is very different from what they were back in ancient Greece. They believe in one God as opposed to hundreds of gods and goddesses, and everything about their culture pretty much can tie into their religion, which is pretty cool. They celebrate Epiphany, which is a religious feast held 41 days prior to Easter. Good Friday and Easter are also two main religious holidays, as well as Christmas. They celebrate them a little differently than us, but they still celebrate them. Their Independence Day is on March 25th, and it celebrates their independence from the Turks. And that's just a little bit about their holidays and celebrations. As far as education goes, it is divided into 3 levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary is divided into kindergarten and primary school for ages 6 to 12. Secondary education, you have gymnasia, which is like our modern day junior high or middle school, and Lyceon, which is the equivalent of our high school. And for students who feel like they are not ready for higher learning at a university level, they may take a vocational route, which is something we also do in the United States. And as far as tertiary education, this is your higher learning past high school that happens through universities and academies. I thought this was an interesting point. all schools, not only private religious schools, but all schools are seen over by the Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs. Like I said, religion is a big part of their lives, and it shows through their education system. Modern Greek, the language, is emphasized as a basic subject, as well as other subjects, math, science, physical education, and English is also taught as a basic subject. And as the students progress through each level, going all the way up to high school, they are eventually taught ancient Greek language because it is important to their heritage and their culture, just like we learn classic literature in our English classes. It's kind of the same thing. So that was pretty interesting. Their government is a parliamentary system. They have 300 seats in the parliament, and members are elected to 4-year terms, so it's very similar to our House of Representatives and Senate seats. And they have both a president and a prime minister. The difference is the people elect the prime minister. He's kind of the voice for the people. And the president is elected by the prime minister. So that's a little different. Their judicial system is an independent body divided into civil and administrative courts. And a current event that's been happening in Greece lately, their government has been facing a mounting debt. It became a crisis with the worldwide recession of 2009, so our country is not the only one who went through this recession. And there was actually a debate on whether or not Greece should still be allowed to be a part of the European Union, but the Eurozone and the International Monetary Fund voted to bail them out with a 110 euro loan, which the euro is their currency. And they had to meet many requirements in order to receive this bailout package, so now that they have received it, they are making their way back and getting things more set on track. So that's good. And I'll end with food. It's very similar to that of other Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultures. Olives obviously are very important to their diet, as well as fish, because they are such a coastal country. The fishing industry is huge. Cheese, zucchini, eggplant, rabbit, pork, lamb, yogurt, they're all foods that encompass a large portion of their diet. So I think that about wraps up the main points that I wanted to cover. So thanks for listening, and I hope you learned a lot. Thanks.